About a century ago, baseball was a national pastime. Players were the heroes, the entire nation loved it. Babe Ruth, he's still an American icon today. However, today, baseball has been passed in the national spotlight by football, and the American viewpoint on sports has changed significantly as football becomes the new national pastime. However, back in 1920, there were players like Babe Ruth. He was the king of sports. He was the Sultan of Swat, all these great Bambino. He was the hero of the time, and people loved him. And at that time, baseball was just so relevant as the top priority of sports because people like him were such big celebrities. And it wasn't just the hitters also, it was the batters, it was the pitchers like Walter Johnson here, who had like 110 shutouts in his career, and a lot more wins, just about 100 under Cy Young, who is also a very big pitcher who still has an award named after him today. Here's a picture of Yankee Stadium in 1920, and as you can barely see in the great quality of the picture, the stadium is filled, everyone went to the game. It was a pretty big deal as tickets were cheap and the amount of time you got for the price you paid was very efficient. People loved baseball a lot. Another instance in which the player was a hero, someone like Lou Gehrig, who gave his speech as the luckiest man on the face of the earth as he was dying from Lou Gehrig disease, a disease still relevant today and called that. He made himself look humble and heroic, and everyone loved him for what he did and how he treated his life. There's also players like Jackie Robinson as time goes on who made a huge stand in the black community as the first player to ever be a black player in baseball, and in just black community standing up to the white man, and even though it got a lot of hate for it, turned around and ended up being very relevant in history throughout. There's also players like Joe DiMaggio, who not only had exceptional field play, but also went out to war and fought in World War II, making him look like a hero. Even though this wasn't in 1920, it was still the olden time of baseball, and made him look like a hero of the time. Then, in 1995, there was a players' strike where the players were not happy with the money they were getting, they decided to strike, there was no World Series, and it was a pretty big deal. This was the first time the players stood up for themselves, didn't really look like just another player, they became more of individuals with their own ideas and whatnot. Then the individual players started coming out, and somebody like Barry Bonds here, who decided to make himself more of a spotlight, not only for his talented play, but for his use of performance-enhancing drugs, his whole treatment of it, and his personality of just watching the home run and making himself the spotlight instead of the game. There's also players like A-Rod here, who decides to swat the ball out of the pitcher's glove, kind of making him look like a fool. Somebody threw a purse on his shoulder because, he's all prissy, and it gives the players less of a heroic look and more of a egotistical look, if you will. But there's also people like Manny Ramirez, who, even though they're egotistical, they were hilarious, and decided Manny being Manny, he wanted to be himself, he was having fun, made the game a little bit more fun. However, he still wasn't as much as respectful to the game, and the game itself was more about individuals as opposed to the team. And of course, whenever you're a small market, and you're not in Boston or New York, you don't get a lot of attention, and people stop going to the games because nobody really cares about baseball as much. Here's Minute Maid Park where the Astros play, not a lot of big names, not a lot of ticket sales, and baseball's declining heavily. Here's the World Series viewership up to 2008, and as you can see, there's a steady drop down, and even though it spikes up when there's a big name team like New York in there, whenever there's, say, Houston versus Chicago like there was in 2005, it goes down pretty significantly. Not a lot of people care. However, there is still a large amount of people who care. As you can see, this is the same field, but during the World Series, it's very full, everyone's going to the game, and the city of Houston was very, very excited for it, as it was the first World Series in Texas, so there's still relevance to it. People still love baseball, just not as much as, say, football. Because here's the Patriots Stadium on just a regular game, there's a lot of people there, a lot more than the average baseball game, and a lot more than most any other sports, because everybody loves football, and stadiums are massive to compensate for the amount of people trying to go to the games, because of how big of a deal it is now. And then here you can see the audience viewership for the Super Bowl, the championship of football, as it is sky high and millions above baseball, well above it, well past it in recent years especially. It seems to be the new national spotlight. Now, in the public consensus, baseball seems to be a little bit more boring, and it's not as exciting as, say, football, where it has the big hits, big plays, people killing each other. It's not as exciting to the violent-loving public of America now. Here's a big hit by Clowney, a player for South Carolina who recently got drafted. It's a big hit, it's a big play, his helmet gets knocked off, it's pretty brutal, and the American people will love it because it's exciting. It's a lot more fun than, say, watching a player swing and miss 3 times. It's not as exciting, it's not as big of a deal with baseball. The reason this didn't happen earlier was because in 1920, football players kind of died a lot. It was a really brutal game, not a lot of padding, and baseball was seen more of a classy gentleman's sport, and excitement wasn't as big of like a deal to have people see, so they were more willing to watch baseball because it was very exciting at the time. However, today there are players like Derek Jeter who make the game look great, they do a great job in what they do, and they bring excitement to the game. So it's not all the way gone, and football will eventually probably fade down as more of the rules change. But for now, the national spotlight has been taken over by football as baseball drops off as a national pastime.